in today's lesson, we will look again at dividing decimals with regrouping. We're also going to look at finding quotients to the nearest tenth and to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to be looking at dividing decimals with 2 decimal places by a whole number, and regrouping is involved. So let's look at this problem up here. A vegetable pizza costs $7.75. The cost is shared equally by 5 students. How much will each student pay? Okay, so we have $7.75 divided by 5. There's our number sentence to match the problem. And so we're going to start, step 1, we're going to divide the ones by 5. So we're going to divide the 7 ones into 5 equal groups. So you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. There's 1 in each group, but we have this leftover part that we have to regroup. Okay, so mathematically, let's look what's happening over here now. So 7 divided into 5 equal groups. There's 1 in each group, and there's 2 left over. So now we need to regroup those 2 ones that are left over. So the 2 ones, when added, or the 2 ones are actually 20 tenths, and so we can add those over into the tenths, and now we have those 20 tenths plus the 7 that were there, and so we have 27 tenths to divide equally among 5 students. Now mathematically, let's look over here and see what happened. So we took the 2 ones that were left over, we combined it with the 7 tenths that were already there, so now we have 27 tenths to divide evenly among 5 groups. So now step 2, we're going to divide the tenths place by 5. So we're going to divide 25 tenths into 5 equal groups. So here's our 5 groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each group. But we still have these 2 tenths that were left over that can't be divided equally. So we're going to have to regroup those into the hundredths. Now let's look and see what's happening there mathematically. So 27 divided into 5 equal groups gave us 5 in each group. And so 5 times 5 is 25. 27 minus 25 is 2. We have those 2 tenths left over that we need to regroup into the hundredths. Now those 2 tenths, when we regroup the 2 tenths, we get 20 hundredths. So the 20 hundredths added with the 5 hundredths that were already there give us 25 hundredths. And so if we look, what's happening mathematically, the 2 tenths were left over. We combined it with the 5 hundredths, or we regrouped it with the 5 hundredths that were already there. So we have 25 hundredths now that we're going to divide into 5 equal groups. And now if we look in the hundredths place, we've created our 5 equal groups, and we can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each group, and there are no hundredths left over to regroup. So let's look and see what happened mathematically there. We had our 25 hundredths to divide into 5 equal groups, and we know that there were 5 in each group. So 5 times 5 is 25. We subtract and have nothing left over. So when, was it pizza? I can't even remember now. When I think it was pizza, $7.75 divided by 5 students, each student would pay $1.55. Okay, why don't we try this one together? $7.40 divided by 4. Okay, so first thing we always want to do is put our decimal point in our quotient lined up with the decimal point in the dividend. Then we can start by dividing our ones place. 7 ones divided into 4 equal groups gives us 1 in each group. Now there's going to be 3 ones left over that we're going to need to regroup with the 4 tenths. So those 3 ones become 30 tenths, and now we have 34 tenths. So 34 tenths divided into 4 equal groups would give us 8 in each group. So 8 times 4 is 32. That gives us 32 in each group, but we still have 2 tenths left over. So those 2 tenths get regrouped with our hundredths, and the 2 tenths become 20 hundredths, and we have 0 hundredths to add to it. So we just have the 20 hundredths now to divide into 4 equal groups. And that would be 5 in each group with nothing left over. So when we divide $7.40 into 4 equal groups, we get $1.85. Okay, your turn. Will you divide $64.25 into 5 equal groups? We could pretend that we're sharing the cost of a dinner between 5 friends. So the total bill for dinner was $64.25, and 5 friends are going to share the cost. So figure out what the quotient would be, what each friend would be paying, and then check back to see if your thinking matches. All right, so step 1, put your decimal point up in your quotient. It's lined up with the decimal point in the dividend. This time we're going to start dividing in the tens place. We have 6 tens. We're going to divide those 6 tens into 5 equal groups. There's going to be 1 in each group, and we're going to have 1 10 left over that we're going to regroup to the ones place. And now we have 14 ones. 14 ones divided into 5 equal groups gives us 2 in each group, but we have 4 ones left over that we'll need to regroup into the tenths place. So our 4 ones become 40 tenths, and we add those 40 tenths to the 2 tenths that are already there. So we get 42 tenths. 42 tenths divided into 5 equal groups gives us 8 in each group, and 8 times 5 is 40, so we have 2 left over. Those 2 tenths are going to be regrouped into hundredths, so that would be 20 hundredths combined with the 5 hundredths that are already there. 25 hundredths divided into 5 equal groups gives us 5 in each group, and nothing left over. So each friend would pay $12.85, or the quotient is $12.85. Now we're going to start talking about finding quotients to the nearest tenth and hundredth. So we're going to jump in with tenths. So let's say we needed to find the value of 5 divided by 8 to the nearest tenth. We're going to talk about what this means to the nearest tenth as we are dividing. But first, let's talk about 5 divided by 8. How would we write this in a division problem that we can solve? Well, 5 is our dividend, remember, inside the division house, dividend, and 8 is our divisor. Remember, we wear our visor when we go, that's a long visor. We wear our visor when we, boy, the drawing's getting worse and worse. Let's start over here. We wear our visor when we go outside to protect our eyes. So it's outside the division house. Okay, so 8 divided by 5. Now you might look at this and say, well, wait, 8 does not go into 5. 5 cannot be divided into 8 equal groups. Well, let's walk through this step by step, because we see here that 5 ones divided into 8 equal groups, there's going to be 0 ones, which is exactly what it's showing here, and there's going to be those 5 ones left over as a remainder. But we can regroup. So let's regroup those 5 ones into tenths. Those 5 ones become 50 tenths, okay? And 50 tenths divided into 8 equal groups would give us 6 in each group. Notice how we added a decimal point. The decimal point is after the whole number 5, so it needs to come right above that in the quotient. Okay, so 6 tenths 6 in each group, so there's 48, because 6 times 8 is 48. We subtract, and we're left with 2 tenths. So we need to regroup those 2 tenths into hundredths, and so 2 tenths is 20 hundredths, and 20 hundredths divided into 8 equal groups would give us 2 in each group, which 2 times 8 is 16, so we have a remainder of 4 hundredths. Now, because this says rounded to the nearest tenth, okay, that means they want us to come up with an answer that is in the tenths place. Now, why did we divide into the hundredths? Well, because we need to use the hundredths place to know whether we need to round up or leave it. So remember our little saying, 5 or above, give it a shove. 4 or less, let it rest. Well, that we're going to use the hundredths place to help us know what to do. So looking at the hundredths place, we have a 2 knocking on the back door, and it's 4 or less, so we're just going to let that 6 tenths rest. So 5 divided by 8, when rounded to the nearest tenth, is 6 tenths. Now let's look to see how this plays out when finding quotients to the nearest hundredth. So if we're looking for an answer or our quotient to be in the nearest hundredth, we're going to need to divide into the thousandths. So let's look and see how this works. So we're going to find the value of 13 divided by 8 to the nearest hundredth. So 13, the first number listed, is the dividend, and the 8, the second number listed, is our divisor, okay, our little guy with the visor, because it's so sunny outside. Okay, so we write this in a way that we can solve it in our division house, and then we can start dividing our 13 ones. So 13 ones divided by 8 gives us 1, or when we divide 13 ones into 8 equal groups, we get 1 in each group, but that gives us 5 ones that are left over. So we need to regroup the remaining 5 ones into tenths, and 5 ones gives us 50 tenths. And so now we can divide. 50 tenths divided into 8 equal groups gives us 6 in each group, and 6 times 8 is 48, so we get 2 tenths left over. So now we're going to regroup the remaining 2 tenths into hundredths, and 2 tenths gives us 20 hundredths. So now 20 hundredths divided into 8 equal groups gives us 2 in each group, and 2 times 8 is 16, so we have 4 left over, 4 tenths left over, 4 hundredths. And so we're going to regroup those 4 hundredths into the thousandths. And 4 hundredths equals 40 thousandths. And so now 40 thousandths divided into 8 equal groups gives us 5 in each group. 5 times 8 is 40 with nothing left over. So we have our quotient of 1.625. And how did we know where to put the decimal? Well, our dividend was the whole number 13, so there's the decimal point in our dividend, and our decimal point in our quotient needs to line up with the decimal point in the dividend. So 1.625 is our quotient, but this asks us to round to the nearest hundredth. So the number in the hundredths place is the 2, and so we're going to draw our back door, and the number 5 is knocking on the back door, and that's 5 or above. So we're going to give the number in the hundredths place a shove. So it would become 1.63. And so our quotient is 1 63 hundredths. Okay, your turn to try. I would like for you to do 9 divided by 4 and 7.56 divided by 8. Be mindful about regrouping. Be mindful about where you're placing the decimal point. Check back here to see if your thinking matches. Okay, 9 divided by 4. Here we go. We have 9 ones to divide into 4 equal groups. There would be 2 in each group. So there's one left over. And so let's place our decimal point in our divisor, our dividend, because it has the whole number 9. So we know the decimal point would go after the whole number 9. And so this is where our decimal point will go in our quotient. So we have 1 1 left to regroup. 1 1 becomes 10 tenths, and 10 tenths divided into 4 equal groups would give us 2 in each group. So 2 times 4 is 8, and we're left with 2 tenths left over. So we're going to combine that, or we're going to regroup that into the thousandths, and 2 tenths becomes 20 thousandths. And 20 thousandths divided into 4 equal groups would give us 5 in each group. And 5 times 4 is 20, with nothing left over. So our quotient would be 2.25. And finally, 7.56 divided by 8. Okay, so decimal point in our quotient is step 1. 7 ones cannot be divided into 8 equal groups, so there would be 0 in each group, which means we have 7 ones left to regroup into our tenths place. And 7 ones becomes 70 tenths, and we add our 5 tenths that are already there. So we have 75 tenths, and 75 tenths divided into 8 equal groups would be 9 in each group. And 9 times 8 is 72. So we have 3 tenths left over to regroup with our hundredths. And 3 tenths gives us 30 hundredths, plus the 6 hundredths that were there gives us 36 hundredths. So 36 hundredths divided into 8 equal groups gives us 4 in each group. And so there's 4 hundredths left over. We can regroup those 4 hundredths into the thousandths, and it would become 40 thousandths. Kind of have to extend our line here. And 40 thousandths divided into 8 equal groups gives us 5 in each group, with nothing left over. So our quotient would be 945,000. So in this lesson, we learned about dividing decimals with 2 decimal places by a whole number with regroup. We also looked at finding quotients to the nearest tenth and to the nearest hundredth.